Hello, and welcome to the Stat Nerd Draft Report. I am your host, Patrick Oxford, and today we have a big group on. We're going to talk about some prospects we're interested to see here in the tournament that's starting up. So first off, we have Will Walker, draft writer for the 94 Feet Report. Eustacchio Raulli, who's a 94 Feet Report writer as well as a writer for Fear of the Sword. And James Blackburn, owner of Power to Win Sports and director of scouting for B-Ball Elite. All right, so let's go ahead and hop into the first team we're going to talk about, which is going to be Cincinnati. So Jacob Evans III is the first prospect I want to talk about. Eustacchio, could you tell us some of the strengths for Jacob Evans?
Well, he's a really strong defensive wing. He's a big part of why that Cincinnati defense has been up at inside the arc. Why that Cincinnati defense has been up at number 2 behind Virginia all year. And he just brings a wide variety of skills to his offensive game. He can pass a little bit, handle the ball. He's a pretty reliable outside shooter, and he scores inside the arc and gets to the line pretty well.
Agreed. Will, anything you want to add about Jacob Evans in terms of maybe his versatility?
I really like his game. He seems to be a surefire first-rounder. He does drive the ball a little better than he used to. Like I said, good D, good shot. And he's a smart player, which, of course, is always helpful.
Yeah, he looks confident shooting the ball to me. According to Will Schriefer's shot charts on the Stepien, he shot 108 NBA threes, hitting just under 41% of them. So that's something to look at. Great shot charts, by the way. Check them out again at the Stepien by Will Schriefer. Will,
I don't think so. I don't think there's that much upside. But then when you get to a certain point in the first round, you're going for someone who you think could just be a player in the NBA, because a lot of these guys are, as we know, they're not going to make it no matter how promising they look. And this guy looks like he basically has a very solid game. So, something that could always, in the position, first of all, is something that's desperately needed. So I'm a big thing on positional scarcity, and he's a wing.
Yep. Any other thoughts on Jacob Evans, Eustacchio?
Yeah, I agree with Will. He's not top 10 pick material, but I think if you put him in a situation where he's probably the 4th best player on the floor, he's going to add a lot of value in that role with his defense, his shooting, ability to attack closeouts, but he doesn't have the upside to go higher, I think.
Any potential destinations either of you would like to see him in?
I think Minnesota would be a good destination for him. I think he would fit there as a backup wing to Andrew Wiggins and Jimmy Butler.
Maybe they could slide Butler over to the 4 in some situations, play all 3 of them, maybe add some defense where Wiggins is kind of lacking, you could say.
Yeah.
And he'd be the perfect just complimentary piece off of them. I agree with that. All right, let's move on to the next player, Gary Clark. He's a really versatile player. James, what are your thoughts on Gary Clark?
Well, the first word that comes to mind is how versatile he is. Not just on offense, but on the defensive end as well. He could guard multiple positions. He's got a lot of length. He's really athletic. And then just with his size, his ability to play on the wing really translates well to the next level. But the big thing that I liked from him was I saw him play last year against ECU, and his confident shooting the ball. It didn't really look fluid, but he did a lot of work on a shot this summer. And when I've caught him on TV this year, he's just shooting it with a lot more confidence. And he went from 28% from 3 to 43 this year, which is a huge improvement. So, I really like him.
Will, what would you say positional versatility his range is?
Oh, I'd look at him as a straight 4, possibly some small ball 5, depending on what sort of system he fits in. And then what players like him, they're very smart. His foot speed's a little slow, and the age, just staying in college for 4 years, of course, sometimes we kind of tend to hold that against people. But, with a smart player like this, there's probably going to be a role for him. I wouldn't see him anywhere near the first round, but, hey, it's a good pick for the second round right here. You got a smart player that can hit some shots, play good team defense, and possibly first round. But, hey, it's a good pick for the second round right here. You got a smart player that can hit some shots, play good team defense, and possibly protect the rim, as a pretty small ball 5, but, in some limited minutes.
Eustacchio, what would you say his range is on your board?
Depending how he finishes the year, I could see him maybe sneaking into the back end of the first round, but I view him as probably between 31 and 45.
All right. And do you have any other thoughts on his versatility defensively?
I view him as a power forward. I do think maybe you could get away with him, like, say, if Golden State drafted him at the end of the first round, they could play him and Draymond Green together, and they could both sort of shift from power forward to center as needed. But I don't think you can rely on him as the only big man on the floor.
Any other thoughts on the Cincinnati players?
I was just going to talk a little bit about Gary
Being a good
the next level at all, or does everybody kind of see him as a straight four and a little bit of small ball five?
I think it's possible he could play some three. I don't think it's out of the question, but I think it would have to be in a good defensive scheme. I don't think it can be on any team. Again, it's probably four primarily, maybe 20% of his minutes at the center, 10% at the three, the others 70% at the four is what I would say.
Yeah, I could see him shifting down to the small forward position situationally, depending on who the opponent is on the floor, but I don't think that would be his primary role. But as I could see him as a 4-3, like you were saying, to a certain degree.
Yeah, no, I agree. I just I've been watching him a lot since high school, and I just worry about his body frame. He just doesn't really have a frame that's gonna add a lot of weight. So I would just worry about him really at any minutes at a five, even if it was in a small ball system, because I just think he would get buried by some opponents. I mean, even if he went up against a team like Houston with PJ Tucker, I could see just burying him under the rim. But I do see him at the most minutes at the four, like you guys said. So.
All right. Yeah, that's some great insight, because I do think there's value to knowing how he's bulked up over the years. And if you've seen him since high school and he does have trouble adding that weight, that's valuable. All right. On to Tennessee. One of my favorite prospects in this draft, Admiral Schofield. He is standing at 6'5" at 238 pounds. His wingspan is over 6'10", so I think there's a decent switchability possibility there for him. William, what do you think about Admiral Schofield's potential as a first-round pick?
He's getting there for me. Right now, I have him ranked around 35 on my board. But like you said, positional versatility and the fact that, again, they need wings in the NBA, and this guy has a pretty good shot. He's just built like a tank, so he could possibly switch on fours. He could, switch around all over the court. I'm trying to look over his stats right now. He's just, he's pretty versatile. He doesn't do a lot of ball handling, though. Not a lot, he barely registers as a pick and roll ball handler, barely does anything off the handoff. That's something where I'd like to see him really put some work in the off season. But hey, everybody needs to work on their game every off season, so you might as well look at something.
Yeah, I agree with you, Will. His frame is just amazing in terms of the positions he could possibly cover. We were talking about Gary Clark possibly covering some five. I think Scope doing some small ball 5 minutes. He plays the 3-4 right now at Tennessee mostly. It was more 4 at the beginning of the season, but he's gone to the 3 lately. I think that there's a high probability that he succeeds to some degree. I don't think he flames out. Do you agree with that, Eustacchio?
Yeah, I think he is a solid player. He's going to add value with his rebounding, with his defense. His outside shooting should translate. So I think he has a relatively high floor. He has an interesting skill set. If you look at his synergy numbers, he has a high number of both post-up and off-screen possessions, which is an odd combination. I'd like to see him continue to improve on his off-screen shooting. If he can become a reliable shooter in those situations, I think he will find rotation minutes in the NBA. He will find rotation minutes in the NBA consistently.
And do you think that he has the possibility to carry that post-up game over to the NBA, or do you think it's kind of a play type that should be abandoned?
I wouldn't abandon it, but I think it should be a situational weapon where he has a size advantage on whomever is guarding him. A way to punish switches, maybe.
Yeah, that's a possible role that he could definitely do well in. Eustacchio, what do you see as Admiral's ceiling in the draft?
I think maybe he could work himself up to around the 23 to 25 range if he has a good tournament. But I could also see him falling into the 40 to 45 range if he just happens to slip through the cracks. So yeah, that's what I would view. That's what I would view as his range, from probably 25 to 45.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that range. Maybe I'm a little bit higher, and I could see him getting into that 18-19 if there's a team that just is there and they think that the fit's there and he can be an instant contributor, because I do think he's someone that can contribute relatively early compared to some other players found in that range. Moving on to Tennessee's other big man, Grant Williams, another undersized player for his position. He's only 6'7", but he's 241 pounds. He does well posting up players that are obviously larger than him, because those are the only players he's going up against. He's in the 71st percentile for post offense, scoring .914 points per possession. And I think, as we've talked about with some of these other players, that could be a weapon for him in this age of switchability. Will, do you think Grant Williams is a second-round prize to come, or do you think he has to come back another season, win another SEC Player of the Year?
I'm not really seeing it as far as the next level. I mean, I know as a college player he's excellent. I don't see the versatility in a player of that size as far as that height goes. He's above average, but it's a college guy. I see him being a professional basketball player. I think he'll probably do amazing in Europe. But I wouldn't spend a second-round pick on him. I think there's more – you would tend to take a player with more upside, even in the late second round. You just got to take your shots when you can. And, I could be wrong. But it's kind of the way I'm feeling about Grant. I do like him, though. I do like him as a player, just more or less as a college player, much not like NBA.
Any differing thoughts on that, Eustacchio?
Yeah, I pretty much have the same opinion of him. I wouldn't view him as a draftable prospect at this point. Maybe if he stays a couple more years in school and continues to develop his skill set, but right now I don't think he's one of the top 60 guys for this year's draft.
Yeah, I think he needs to come back next season and do what Admiral Schofield did and just put in the work in the offseason, because it looked like he had a potential shot his freshman season. He shot 37.5% on 1 attempt per game his freshman year. And then this year it just dropped to 12% on 0.8 three-point attempts per game. So, I mean, it's kind of hard to say that there's potential for the three, because at that low of a sample as freshman year, it's easily in the fluke territory. But it's something I think to keep an eye on for next season, because if he does have that three-point shot, and I'm not as sold on him, on his defense as apparently Rick Barnes is, comparing him to P.J. Tucker. I think Schofield's the obvious P.J. Tucker comparison on that Barnes comparison too. So I think he's worth a look next season if that three-point percentage picks up. Any thoughts, Eustacchio, on a potential Tennessee versus Cincinnati matchup?
I think that would be a lot of fun to see that matchup. Two of the best defenses in the country. I would lean towards Cincinnati advancing in that matchup, but it really would be a toss-up. I mean, they're both so good. I feel like both of them were a little bit underseeded in the tournament.
Will, what could Schofield do in this matchup to move himself up on your board, should it happen?
Well, if he takes care of what he's supposed to do against Evans, I hope they're matched up against each other. That would be just gold, scouting gold for us draft guys, just to watch those two go head-to-head. And that's what I'm hoping for. Grant Williams hopefully he gets to match up with Clark. We'll see how that works. There's probably going to be a lot of switching and stuff going on, but I'd like to see those two go up against each other. Basically, Like I said with Schofield, it's the assist to turnover ratio. He's got more turnovers than assists. I just want him to clean that up. Of course, every player's got his weakness, but Evans is going to take advantage of that.
This matchup is super exciting, potentially. I know coaches tell players not to look ahead, but I'm looking ahead on the schedule. Sorry. Most dangerous time to do it in the year as well. All right, on to our next team, Rhode Island. James, why don't you give us the down low on Jared Terrell?
Okay, yeah, he's he's a really strong combo guard. He's got good length to him. He can really score the ball. He's had a terrific year with EC Matthews kind of having a down year a little bit. Really athletic. Gets to the rim. He's another one where his 3-point shot has improved, which is good. And he used to be a guy that just got to the rim every time. That wasn't really a shooter, but now he's knocking down his 3-ball. So I like him. I think he's definitely a guy that's really grown on a lot of NBA scouts this year. Coming from Rhode Island, he doesn't really get the national publicity as much, but I think Rhode Island going to the tournament last year helped him, and then he's just continued to improve, and now they're back in the tournament again. So.
And Will, do you have anything else to add about Terrell?
No, I don't have a whole lot to add about Terrell. I'm more of a Stanford Robinson guy.
Understood. And Terrell's backcourt mate, EC Matthews, he's pretty exciting to me in terms of just creating just energy on the court. Will, what do you think about in terms of just creating just energy on the court? Will, what do you think about EC Matthews?
I love watching EC Matthews play. I wish he just shot the 3 a little better. I think he's got a lot of potential. He's a competitor, decent size. Not a whole much of a playmaker. Again, he suffers from the whole negative assist to turnover ratio also, but good size, good looking stroke. It just doesn't seem to go in as much as you would like it to. His free throw shooting is, right at 75% for the year. Just can't seem to make the 3-ball go down, but an exciting player, very, very bad in spot ups. So, what are you going to do? Love him though.
James is a fan of Matthews as well. Is there anything you want to add about him?
Yeah, no, he got it right. He's a guy that last year I absolutely loved him at the A-10 tournament that I saw him. Here, I think the injuries, he's always battled some leg injuries, and I think that's just taken a toll on him this year. And he's just been, he's had to shoulder more of an offensive load. Him and Terrell, but Terrell's kind of, done it, and EC just, he's just inconsistency, I think, is like the name of the game for him. He'll have one big time game, and then the next game, he just won't really show up as much. And I think, the 3-point inconsistency, he's had some games where he's knocked down several threes, but then he'll just go cold. So I think ultimately that's going to keep him, out of the NBA this year. So.
Will, what are you looking forward to in this OU Rhode Island matchup?
I'm looking forward to see if Trae Young can get through the gauntlet of all those Rhode Island guards. Like I mentioned Stanford Robinson earlier, he's another little he's 6'4", and they seem to want to compete. Stanford was a former highly regarded recruit that went to Indiana and then had to transfer from Findlay Prep. I kind of expected more out of him. He just is what he is. He'll play professionally somewhere, just not in the NBA probably. But, yeah, Trae Young going against them is going to be something to watch to see if he can fight through a lot of the physical guards like we saw with Javon Carter. They can take their toll on Trae and his I guess you would say, his slight frame at this point in his career.
Yeah, and what are you looking for in this matchup, James?
Same thing. I haven't seen OU a lot this year, but I know that Trae Young, the second half of the year he's struggled, and I think EC Matthews, he's a big physical guy. So just like you said, they have multiple guys to kind of throw at him, and Trace could be the vocal point for Rhode Island defensively. So they're gonna throw everything they have at him. For Rhode Island defensively, so they're gonna throw everything they have at him.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun matchup for sure. I have my roots back to OU, so I'm firmly in the Trae Young Oklahoma camp for that game, but I'm sure that I'll have plenty of people in my mentions if I tweet anything about it. So I'm probably going to keep quiet. So let's move on to Syracuse. Tyus Battle is an interesting prospect. Eustacchio, you're fond of Battle's game. How about you give us the down low on Battle?
Well, I'm a Cuse fan, so I'm a little bit biased, admittedly. But I think that he's just so miscast in his current role that by adjusting his role at the next level, he could become a valuable player. Right now, he's number one in all of college basketball in minutes played and usage rate. Being the primary scorer for basically 40 minutes a game is not the ideal role for him. He's had 200 pick and roll ball handler possessions, 130 isolation possessions, when really I think he should be more of a spot up guy that attacks closeouts. And so his free throw percentage is 83% for his career. His 3-point percentage, it's 34%, even though he's taken a lot of those off of the bounce. So I feel like if you scaled his roll down and made him like an 18% usage guy in the NBA, made him the fourth or fifth best player on the floor, he could add value with his shooting and his defense potentially. But there's a lot of projection to get to that point, though.
Yeah, I think it's the role change is going to be key for him. James, you've seen him. What did you think about his game?
I agree. First of all, with what Eustacchio said about the role change. You've seen him much more than I have. I've seen him a couple of times on TV, and then I saw him live once this season. But I mean, he's the guy that he takes a lot of shots. I mean, he's a volume shooter, which again, he plays a lot of minutes, and he kind of has to do that. But I wasn't a huge fan of his attitude at times. I don't know. I mean, I see him as a player who thinks he's a little better than he really is. He could possibly be, a late second round pick, but I could see him also as like a two-way guy that spends a lot of time his rookie year in the G League.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, the attitude thing is a valid question. And like, for example, another Syracuse guy a few years back, Deion Waiters, had trouble scaling his role down in the NBA. He wanted to be the guy, but he wasn't talented enough. And so I think when teams interview Tyus Battle, trying to determine how he would feel about changing his role in the NBA would go a long way towards whether he is a draftable prospect or not.
Man, the citizens of Rhode Island are about to be all in Eustachio's mentions. And Will, what do you think about his draft range? James mentioned late second round, possible two-way contract. Is that where you view him as well?
Personally, if I'm drafting, I don't draft him in the second round, but I can see teams doing that. I mean, you're looking at a guy who's 6'6" and he has a nice looking stroke. Like you said, on spot ups, free throw percentage, it looks good. Let's see, what was I looking at? He's in the 100th percentile in the short shot clock runners, which, I mean, that's an interesting little sample size, 10 possessions, 13 points. But he's, the usage will have to go down. I'm sure it will in the next level. Again, I think there's players with more upside to take in the second round, but I can see a team taking a chance. Again, he's a wing, right? He's 6'6". He can play the 2, the 3. Teams love that.
Yeah, it's about sorting out which wing is going to do it, and I think that's the key to scouting in the NBA right now. Finding which wings are the diamond in the rough, and people say it's low chance to hit on those picks, but I think that there's definitely ways to separate who's going to do it and who's not. And James, with his comments about his attitude, I think probably is going to be right on in my projection of Tyus Battle in terms of his attitude affecting the ability to change his role. Much like Deion, he likes to shoot, and we don't bring a whole lot to the game outside of shooting on offense in terms of what you yourself value, and I think he himself values scoring a whole lot. It's tough to project the smaller role for the player scoring a whole lot. It's tough to project the smaller role for the player. Let's go on to Davidson. Peyton Aldridge is an interesting prospect to me. Eustacchio, what kind of role could you see for Peyton Aldridge at the next level?
Well, he's an interesting player because of the size and shooting combination he brings to the table. He's been a reliable outside shooter all 4 years at college. And he's also an effective scorer inside the arc, post-up situations. And so the offensive skill set is intriguing. Personally, I haven't watched him enough to have any strong opinion about his defense, but that's the question mark for me.
James, you said you've watched quite a bit of Davidson. Is Peyton Aldridge a guy that stands out to you?
Oh yes, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of him. I mean, I've seen him a ton all 4 years. He's been consistently good, but like was already mentioned, I mean, he could shoot the lights out of the ball. Great in pick and pop situation. He projects as a perfect stretch four man at the next level. He could definitely score it inside the arc as well. I mean, he's a really good post-up player, good footwork, scored over both shoulders. The thing that worries me too is his defense. I mean, he does work really hard on that end. He just is limited with his length and his athleticism, so he's not a shot blocker. He does guard the pick and roll pretty well because he plays so hard on that end. But I'm just not quite sure he could guard fours in the next level. But, we'll have a good chance to see him. I mean, I'm pretty sure he'll be at the Portsmouth Invitational. He'll get his chances. He'll be at Vegas Summer League. I think if he could just get a little bit tougher, I see a lot of Tyler Kavanaugh, who I wasn't sure. I didn't think Tyler was going to make it to the NBA this year. And, he's getting minutes and he's playing with Atlanta. So you can never rule a guy like Peyton out, especially with how good he can shoot it. But I see him taking the long road. I see him taking the long road and possibly, getting that two-way contract.
Will, do you think he's a guy that could be on draft radars at the end of the second round, or do you think he's a guy who's going to have to earn it on the two-way and prove himself?
I'm not even sure if he'll earn it on a two-way or if he'll just be a G League guy. He seems to be like a poor man's McDermott, Brian Cardinal type, too slow. Great shooter, just doesn't move his feet well enough on the defensive end to actually stay on the floor enough to let his shot work for him. He does have a positive assist-to-turnover ratio, which is something that seems sort of rare in this bracket. Again, I don't want to talk bad about these young men, but I don't see an NBA future for him, just point blank.
Kellen Grady is another interesting prospect for Davidson. He's a lot younger. He's only a freshman right now, but I think that in terms of 2 years down the road, there's definitely some intrigue. Did anything stand out about his game here on draft radars to you, James?
No, I like Grady. And what's abnormal about him is the fact that he's in system as a freshman, or McKillop's system, as a freshman, which he's not known for playing freshmen this many minutes. I doubt that he would, come out next year. I can maybe see him testing the waters next year, but definitely coming back. I see him as more of at least 3 years, but probably 4-year guy. He's got great size to him, and he's really athletic. And his shot just needs to really improve. That's the biggest weakness I'd see with him.
I like what I've seen from him so far. And if you look at his percentile rank, half court overall, 98%, that's pretty high. He's got 100% after timeouts, 90th percentile, 99th percentile, and pick and roll ball handler, which is something I didn't really expect to be looking at right now. I think he's got some potential. Like I said, it's probably going to take a couple of years over there with Coach Bob, but hey, give him a chance. I would like the way he looks so far.
Yeah, I agree with what Will said there. I mean, I don't think he's on the draft radar for this year, certainly, but he's been a really solid rotation player for them, and there's a lot to like in his skill set. So I think another year or two down the road, he could play himself into being an NBA prospect.
Maybe even a 4-year. I could see him winning Conference Player of the Year down the road. Absolutely. Once you win Conference Player of the Year, some team might take a chance on you just at the two-way contract level just to see, hey, is it going to translate? Because they're going to want first dibs on you if it does translate. And the two ways right now are so cheap and teams are cycling through them so fast. I think next season we may see a lot more players go through those two-way. Contracts. So moving on to the University of Houston, my hometown. Uh, Robert Gray Jr. is a guy that has really been electrifying. He's able to create in the pick and roll well. James, what's your impressions of Robert Gray so far?
Well, I've seen him only play like once this year on TV, but I saw him this summer at the CP3 camp, elite camp, and he was one of the top 3 guards that I saw. And this was, going up against several other guys that will be drafted. And I loved him. I mean, he was super poised. He's an incredible ball handler, changes speeds really well, can really shoot it, really just goes hard in everything he does. He really competes. I love how competitive he is. When I saw him this summer, I got a really good look at him. I was like, he's gonna have a huge year, and he has. So I'm really looking for him to have a big tournament because coming from Houston, he's not a household name yet, but I think in this tournament he can make that of himself.
Will, how much do you think he can help himself in this tournament?
If he takes Houston on a run, I can see people getting excited about him. Of course, he's a little on the short side. But I noticed him first last year when I was kind of scouting Damian Dotson. And he certainly does not lack for confidence. He's got a 4.5 assists for the year. He's improved in that every year. He doesn't foul very much. He tries to play D, even at his little short stature. And I like his hair. I mean, I don't know if he's an NBA player or not, but he's got a lot of confidence to do what he's got to do on the court. He should play somewhere professionally.
Eustacchio, do you have him on this year's draft radar, or is it going to be hard road NBA as opposed to somewhere like Europe?
I see him as more of a European prospect. I think he could do really well over there. But unless they have some sort of crazy run in the NCAA tournament, I'm not sure if he can get on the draft radar for this year. They do have an opportunity in where they've been slotted in the bracket. That region, and there's a lot of good teams, but there's no dominant team in that region. Xavier is probably the weakest 1 seed on the board. So if they have a hot streak, I could see them maybe making the Final Four out of that region, but it's a long shot. So, and without that publicity, I don't see him playing himself into a second-round draft pick.
Yeah, I think he's a player that may pop more once you really get into the nitty-gritty. As I was watching some of his pick-and-roll possessions, pretty high IQ, I thought, finding spot-ups. They don't have a great dominant big man to throw to the roll, so his numbers there are kind of weak. But in terms of overall pick-and-roll production, he's really strong there. So, the European game with his size might be the way to go. I think, again, with a big tournament run, maybe he gets on teams' radars. I think the Summer League is really going to be where he's going to be able to either make a spot for himself or go on to Europe, and maybe we see him in a few years, or maybe he just plays his whole career out there. All right, the last player we're going to look at, Corey Davis Jr. He is a junior at Houston, and he is not shy about shooting the ball one bit. Eustacchio, what stood out about Corey Davis Jr. to you?
Just the volume of the three-point shooting. I mean, he has 102 three-point makes this year. That's over 4 makes per
Corey Davis Jr. to you.
Just the volume of the three-point shooting. I mean, he has 102 three-point makes this year. That's over 4 makes per 40 minutes played. And he's draining them at 44%, which is just unreal. So as a shooter, he has a lot of appeal. The rest of his game, I don't see a lot there. And at his size, guards are usually expected to bring a more diverse skill set to the table. But when someone is shooting that well, they have to be on the radar, I think.
Will, do you think there's anything he could add to his game next season possibly to push himself maybe into second-round draft talks? Or is he pretty much limited into what he's going to do and there's not much room for improvement? Which way are you leaning?
I'm leaning towards without a growth spurt. I don't know how he can shoot much more, like Eustacchio was saying. 9.4 three-point attempts per 40 minutes. He really jacks him up. I tell you what, I'd like to watch him play again next year. I don't think he's coming out. I don't think he should, but we'll see.
All right. Thank you for listening to the Stat Nerd Draft Report. I want to thank Will Walker, Eustacchio Raulli, and James Blackburn for coming on. Y'all were awesome today. I thought we had a very productive talk. Give your Twitter handles out. Eustacchio, what's your handle?
My handle is at EVR1022.
And Will, what is your handle?
At Will Andy Walker NBA.
And James, go ahead and give him yours as well.
It's at James Jr.
And you can find me at Hoops Metrox. Follow, subscribe, and thank you for listening.